Welcome to another Tableau tutorial video. I'm Weston Palmer. Let's get started. Maybe you've got a client that has come to you and said, hey, I've got a lot of customer data. I want to understand it better. In this case, we're going to be looking at some Airbnb data. And what you're going to see here is the user, this is the transaction ID number, check-in date, check-out date, booking date, property, the guest ID, guest counts. That could be important if you're trying to understand a particular segment. The city, I don't know why we've got the reviewer there. Oh, these are comments, sorry. And then how much various elements of the payment. This is going to be a little bit longer video, but I'm going to be pulling in a lot of different elements that maybe you've seen in some of my other videos. I hope you'll stick till the end. It's going to be real exciting. First thing I did was I created a field called guest total views. This is a fixed function, and we're saying for the guest ID, just count up the number of incidents or stays that they had. You could probably include location in here, but at this point I'm just trying to see the total number of stays this guest had at these properties. I think there's actually 5 or 6 properties. The other thing I created was this other max night stay. So we can understand if a guest stayed multiple times, did they stay 1 night or 20 nights? Very similar function, guest ID, and then the max number of nights. That was one of the fields for each stay. It had how many nights that was. The next thing I did, actually I've deleted it, so we're going to do it again. Under total visits, create bins. And you can see here's a size of 0.7. I really want a size of 1. Nobody's staying 0.7 times. They're either staying once or they're not staying. And you can see the max number, the range here is 1 to 4. So 1 isn't too bad. Some of those bins, we'll just round this up to 4. Because you're going to get a lot of smaller bins with not very many items in there. So let's do, since we're on this max night stay, let's just keep going with that. We want that on the columns. We want those to be along the bottom. And here we go, 0 to 4. We'll probably go in there and create an alias so that it's 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 11. And now we're going to grab the guest ID and pull that over to rows. And we're actually going to do a measure. Count distinct guests in that bucket. I'm going to do a bar chart for this. And this is about what I would have expected. Most of the guests stay between 0 and 3 days. And then 4 to 7 days is a much shorter amount. But here's a couple group here. There's 3 people that stayed an extended period of time. And my thought is that would be a segment that we would want to look at. We'll just call it long-term stay. And so now we have got that set that we can use later on. We'll call this length. And now we're going to do something very similar. And now we're going to see how many people total visits. Put that, no, actually we want the bin. Did I create the bin? Yep, put the bins here. And we're going to bring the guest, and we're going to change that to count distinct as well. And that is kind of what I would expect to see. We had 15 people that stayed there more than 3 times. And actually, I'm going to group all of these people into a bucket as well. I figure if they're coming back more than once, they like it, maybe there's something that we can do to encourage them to stay even further, even longer. Now, to be honest, maybe on the 4, we'll probably break that down even further, but We'll just call this frequent guests. Now, let's see if we can put this long-term stay on this filter. And what this tells you is if this person was a long-term stay, remember if they were, we'll put long-term stay on the color here, if they were 12 days or longer, they stayed only once, or we had 2 people that stayed twice. All right, let's see here. We'll call frequency. Now the other thing that we want to do, a lot of this stuff is just, you're just trying to look at the data. What is the data telling you? So we'll pull that off for now. Now we're going to do state. Let's see here, country. Let's add city. This takes a second. So let's put guest count under the tooltip. Just understand 1, 2, 1, 1. All right, so most of the guests are from the United States, which is not terribly surprising. So let's actually we're going to focus on just the United States. We're not going to exclude those other people, but in the big scheme of things, they're probably not the people we're going to focus on. Actually, let's see if we can get total visits. Put that on color. Maybe there's something there. Okay. And I want to actually change the color. It's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so we see a lot that are in only 1, which is not surprising. Here we have 131 unknown. So let's go ahead and click on that. There may be, let's edit the locations. There may be some sites in here that Canada, okay, Abilene, Anchorage. So there must be a lot of different Bedford, Bellingham, Oregon, Beaverton, Oregon, I believe, Bellingham, Boston. So what this is telling you is that some of these states, some of these cities are in multiple states. Durango's in Colorado, but there may be someplace else that I don't know. Everett, Washington. And if you have a pretty good idea of where that is, they are going, go ahead and fill that in. Otherwise, in this case, I'm just going to leave it off. I'd sure hate to assign it to a country or to a state that it didn't belong to. And so we're going to put under filters, we're just going to filter out everything we're just going to look at the United States. Well, that's not what I was expecting it. Oh, that's because it's probably not all filled in. The field wasn't filled in. So we're just going to keep those that are in this area. Just right click, keep only. And we'll put guest count. That's guest country. Get rid of that. We'll put the guest ID. We're going to put that on size. And what this will do, let's see if we got this. We're going to make this count distinct. And give us an idea of where our guests are coming from. Make it a little bit bigger here. So you can see a lot of them are coming from Colorado Springs, Wichita, Kansas, Chicago, New York. Actually, I'm curious if these are cities that have direct flights into Colorado Springs, if that could be the reason. Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to see if there's any patterns. Let's take the long-term stay. What does that tell if we dump that onto color? It's tough to tell. There's a couple different places. So that was not as informative. what I was kind of expecting is that maybe it would all come from Colorado, because I don't know where these properties are. Maybe they're in Colorado, or maybe they would be from someplace. Okay, that's long-term stay. Let's get rid of that. Let's say total visits, frequent guests. Let's put that on color. Yeah, this is what I'd expect to see from the frequent visitors. Most of it is in Colorado. Fair number from New York. Some big cities from Coppell, Tulsa. So they're from all over the country. Not so much Washington. Now, I'm going to surmise here, this would be my next hypothesis, is that look at this area in here. A lot of flat lands. Maybe they are going to Colorado for skiing, right? So let's take a look at that. Next look is for time frame. And we're going to put in booking date, check-in date. We don't want to necessarily know when they booked it. We want to know when they're staying. So we're going to put the date. And we want more than just the year. We want the month. And we're going to put the guest ID again. Put that under account. Month of check-in. So this is interesting. One of these big spike. This might be the properties, different properties. They added a property. If you remember, this was when COVID was a big hit. Not a big hit, but in March and April, when there was a lot of shutdown, people not wanting to go out, ramp up. This is probably another property as well. I believe, like I said, they have 5 or 6. So let's put in total number. Let's see the max stay on this. We'll put that on color, which will break it out. And let's highlight that. These two, this was in April and March. This is for this entire April through August. 16 in that same time frame. Here's 8. What's interesting now to me is, and then 0, is if you look at these, a couple of these properties, all of them were in this kind of time frame. So I'm going to change, and we're actually going to put, did I have the property name? Let's put the property name, we're going to change this to bars. I'm going to put the property name, and you can kind of see here, it was just orange. Then they added this yellow, and the red, and the green, and this purple here, Vibrant Victorian. That's interesting to me. So let's pull over, what was it that we had? Max night stay, long-term stay, I think that was, put that on filter. And that is not quite what I was expecting. Remember, we had a lot of the Victoria House here, and my thought was that the longer stays would be in that time period. Here's 2020. So it's across a couple different ones. It's interesting that the Victoria stay was not included at all. And so there doesn't seem to be any real consistency. I'm not seeing anything in terms of the month. You'll see here this July to August was blank. I was hoping this might be, focused in on a particular, winter time, or the summertime, but we can see here that it's 1 month, 2, so there's a broad range. Let's get rid of the month, or replace the month with the property. Get rid of the month for a second. And the cabana is the one that has the most people staying there longest. All right, let's get rid of that. Frequency, where are the most people staying? And you can see this yellow and green are fairly, let's flip that one around, do property name. Let's see, was that what? Yeah, yellow and green. The Olympic House, Olympic Studio, and whatever this in here is, Olympic Flat. I'm going to do one more thing here. Let's do calculated field, and let's do, let's call this booking ahead. And we're going to use, I'm going to create this field. It's going to be a date difference. Date diff. We want to know what the difference is, and we want to do the day. So a single quotation in day. It's got to be all lowercase. You could do month or year. And we want the start date to be the booking date. When did we book it? Versus when did we check in? And I'm wondering if this will tell us something about the people that check in. We'll just go to another one here. We're going to do frequency of guests. We'll put this on the rows. And where was the booking? Oh, book ahead. And we don't want sum. We want average. And so if it was a frequent guest, if they stay there multiple times, they're only booking up out ahead, this would say 11 days. If they're not, it's out 18 days. So let's actually grab the stay. We're going to put that on the details. We'll get that. We'll take the frequency. What I'm looking for, that is not what I am looking for. Let's see here. We want a box and whiskers, what we want. And so this is somewhat interesting here. And this is what we were seeing as the median is 8 days if they haven't been, if they're not a frequent stayer, or 6 days. But the range is much broader. You're going to get some people, this is their first time booking almost a year in advance, versus somebody that's been there before, has stayed there many times, they know what they want, and they're only booking maybe at the max 2 months out. So that could tell you something. Let's see here, frequency of guest. That's what we've got up there now. Let's try max night stay. Let's put that on the bin. If they're staying, 4 to 7 days, they're booking almost a year out. Probably, a vacation with family. They're trying to make sure they got to get plans in place. If it's a 12-night stay or a 16, now granted, the number here is smaller. 20-night stay, 28-night stay. This is interesting as well. How many of these guys are there? Oh, that's the actual individual. The UI. Oh, that's the stay. So let me see if this is night stay and frequency of guest. Put that on color. That was hard to see. So I'm going to put in as red. And a frequency, I'm going to put frequency of guest. I'm going to put that on this. It changes to shape. Put the frequency on the shape as well, and that allows us to frequent client or guest. So the frequent, those that are more frequent, let's just filter on that. Let's see what that tells us. If they've visited more than once and they're staying just for a couple days, the median is they're only going to give you 2 days notice. 4 to 7 days if they're a frequent person. Their max night stay is max night stay. It's 10 days ahead. And if the max night stay is, if they're going to stay 8 to 12, median is 12. I mean 12, this one goes down a little bit, but there's not a whole lot of data points, so it's hard to tell if that's just a trend or if that's just an outlier. So now we need to start creating a profile. We're going to put the bins, total visits on the left, frequency of guests, where is that bins? Max night stay on the top. How many people, we need to get the guest count. No, not there. Your text, oh, change that to measure. Understanding of your total guest. Let's change this to maybe we can do a table calculation too. And you've got a table calculation here. We're going to have to change compute using and if we wanted, control and drag it over to color, and we'd want to change this to square, and now you've got your heat map. This is about what you'd expect to see, is that most of your people are in, more, almost 80%, almost 90% are one-time visitors between 1 and 7 days. So now that we've got total visits, max night stay, I'm looking at this and I'm starting to see kind of some categories or segments that we could think of. You've got this section here, 1 night, less than 4 nights, very transactional. From 4 to 7 nights, maybe this is your vacation people. Anything more than that, 2 to 4, we'd call those frequency, frequent visitors. You have to be careful. It's tempting to break these out too, but they're so small and it's really tough. I was thinking about looking at it from a dollars view, but that's going to be really highly correlated to the number of days you stay. So this gets close to, what is that, like 2, 2.8, this would be 3, and maybe 4 be another segment, and then long-term visitors would be another segment. So how do we break these out? How do we create this? So we're going to call this customer segment or guest segment. I think that's the proper word. Oops. And we're just going to use a fairly involved if-then statement. So we're going to start with if guest total visits. We'll start with the easiest ones first. If it's greater than 1, then we're just going to call that free guest. Frequent guests. Else, now we're going to say if the max night stay in the bin is greater than or equal to 8, then we're going to call them long term. We're going to actually say here, now we can say if the max stay in the bins is equal to 4, vacation, and then everything else is going to fall into a transactional. Because some people just need a place to stay for the night. Okay, it's giving me a error, so let's see what that error is. Oh, here's the issue. You see this? These are all probably like text. So let's change that to just visits. And we'll get rid of that. And then we'll be going off of the underlying data. And it should be okay. All right. So now we have something we're using for our segment. Let's just bring this over. And now we're going to just start putting items in. We'll just start filling out the sheet that you can then provide to a client. So here, this instant booked, this was actually a yes or a no. And so that's why you're getting these percentages. And so we can just change that to a percentage. Now you've got a little bit more information about the place, how many guests were staying, vacation rental, fairly big. These are all going to be kind of what you're expecting to see, actually. That the biggest one is probably, the bigger one is what we were calling our vacation, and versus the frequency of guests. And now if you look at the payout amount, come over here, here's the total price, payout amount. If you start going down very far, you'll notice that there's 0. So those zeros are going to, I don't know what that 0 could be for. No claims? So that'll be something we'll have to, how do we handle that? Maybe they got some sort of discount. So we'll just do total price. Off of total price divided by nights, all right? So average price is total price divided by nights. Now, how are we going to handle the if? We'll say if total price equals 0, oops, that's O, 0, then we're just going to have it be null. And it won't get, we'll see how that works. I'm wondering, that's night price. We'll just call this nightly price. Because when we bring it over, we want the average. Bring over the nightly price. We're going to do average. And this is kind of what you would think, right? If somebody's going to stay there longer term, you're going to give them maybe you give them a discount. Maybe they don't have to pay as many cleaning fees, or the cleaning fee gets spread over multiple days. And now you have kind of a category, and you could go further down. You could start looking at where they stay. And we could actually, let's do one more. And we're going to bring in the guest, the segment columns, and we're going to bring in the check-in date again. This time, check-in date, and we're going to make it quarterly. Let's just add it all up. We'll just put monthly, and we will do guest ID. And there's nothing really under transactional or vacation follow a similar pattern. Frequent guests mostly in the spring and summer, and long-term guests actually have a decreasing, but you're only looking at 4. I mean, that would be interesting to understand why they're checking in January, like after the holidays. So we have all this information. Last thing we're going to do, we'll build a quick dashboard. On the frequency, I'm just going to the sheet. I'm going to get rid of the maps. Guest city, latitude, okay. The dashboard. It's not very. And what I will do is use this as a filter for everything else. So now when I click on transactional, you have an idea. Now the one thing to do to make this a filter on all of them, you'll see if you click on transactional, there's no data here. And that's because it doesn't have anything to tie. Issue, I believe, is we had another filter on there, frequency. So now if we hit transaction, you can see it moves a little bit. Vacation. Frequent guest, that's interesting. Once again, frequent guest, you can see a lot of them are in Colorado, some of these big cities. There's only 36, but long term, once again, big cities, big on the East Coast. That's interesting. And maybe you know more information as the property owner. They would know more information about the characteristics of these houses that might indicate that one's better than the other. But now they have a real quick they're able to view and differentiate between their segments and how that affects their properties, or how their properties affect transactional. Thanks for watching. Hope you found that video helpful. Hit subscribe and the bell so you get notified when I release new videos. And check out my other videos to learn even more about Tableau.